When I'm laughing with you, I'm laughing with God. So we are in week 5 of Think Again. And there's lots of things about this book that are challenging. Let me say that. But there's lots in this book that I think is just so, thought-provoking. And that's really why I picked it, is so that we can wrestle with some things, so that we can get our brains out of what we think is the norm and just start questioning everything. And so this week we're looking at charged conversations. Last week, what we were looking at for the past couple weeks is this idea of how do we create a safe space, right? How do we move past this idea of an us and them? How do we move into a consciousness that actually allows us to listen to people who may hold beliefs that we don't agree with? And remember, one of the main pieces that we've been looking at is about how our beliefs are not actually our identity, that our values are our identity. So our values here in unity are our spiritual principles of love, light, joy, peace, harmony. That's what we base our identity upon, the values, not our opinions about it, but those actual values. And in that space of value meeting value, there is a place for differing opinions. And it asks us to step into this 4-step sort of process, which is I see you, I respect you, even if I don't agree with you. Tell me more, I can think again. So we're not expecting other people to change, but instead we are willing to be changed ourselves in some way. And that's a really big difference. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on in my talk. And we've been talking about deep listening, which, as I have been defining it, means that we're willing to let go of what we know, right? And I know we all have lots of, I know, did you hear that? I know that we all have mega experience from our lives that have brought us to decisions and choices about what we believe about the world and about ourselves and how things work. Are we willing to admit that we don't know it all? That there are actually things happening in this world, experiences that people are having in this world, which are nothing like the experiences that we may have had in the world. And can we open ourselves up to be a larger container? So that's what deep listening does, is it creates an opening so that there's possibility. There's possibility for something new to arise within each one of us in every moment. We believe this in Unity. We believe in our capacity to be made new. We believe in our capacity to choose anew. The past is not our precedent. What may have happened before does not have to define our now or our future. But it asks that we let go of what we know about the precedent and be willing to step into something in a completely different way. And one of the things that was in last week's reading is this idea that we create stereotypes and generalizations about the people in the world. We do it about ourselves. We create generalizations about ourselves. We decide that because I'm too old, I can't do X, Y, or Z. Or it'll be really hard to do X, Y, or Z. Now, everyone in here should go talk to Charcel, right? Because that woman just came back from the Camino, right? And it's not about your physical age. It's about your consciousness. So how are you stereotyping and creating generalizations about yourself, about who you understand yourself to be, and then all the ways that we create stereotypes and generalizations about the people that we are interacting with in the world? And this piece about how we are invited as a spiritual community who says that we're open and inclusive and welcoming. how do we break free from these stereotypes and these generalizations? So I know a lot of the facilitators in the book studies, you guys are doing amazing things. I just want to say, can we give the facilitators for the book studies just some love? Really, people are sharing with me, like, here's a video, and here's what I showed in my book study. So I found a video, too. Are we ready with that? Up there in the booth? They're working on it. Oh, yeah, they're getting ready. So this video came out a couple of years ago during either the Golden Globes or the Oscars. I can't remember which. And whenever you're ready, babe.
If you think you know what happens next, ask yourself why. These are the black stories we've been shown. A narrow view that limits our understanding. But there's so much more to see. Of black life. Let's widen the screen so we can widen our view.
So a lot of that was just about editing. It was about sound going on behind the story that was creating a specific feeling and energy. We do this in our own life. We create soundtracks to the stories that we're seeing. We create the ambiance in which what we are watching or observing or caught in the middle of is happening. We edit out the things that don't fit into the narrative that we have created, and we ignore them. We stop seeing what isn't in service to the larger picture. So we're each always being invited to widen the lens for ourselves. And you could put any underrepresented group in there, and it would be the same. Any underrepresented group. In fact, you could put any group in there, even those that are not actually, quote unquote, underrepresented. We are constantly trying to make things manageable, constantly trying to limit, to make something as understandable as possible. We simplify down to the smallest common denominator. And that's how we process information. So these coming chapters are all about embracing complexity. That we are being invited to not go for the easy answer. That we are being invited to step beyond what seems to be the easiest route from A to B. And what the research that Adam Grant puts forward suggests is that complexity can disrupt those overconfident cycles and put you into a place of rethinking. Because when we're creating the narrative just from habit, it's because we're confident that we think we already know what's happening. I mean, the first time I saw that, and they said, if you think you know what's going to happen next, I knew what they were talking about. I felt myself falling into that narrative. So part of what we're being invited into through our spiritual principles is how do we break free from that narrative? Because here's the thing, it doesn't just limit the person who we're putting the narrative upon, it also limits us. It's limiting us at the same time. So people are actually more inclined to think again if we present topics through the many lenses of a prism. So actually, the more complex an issue is, and the more it's presented as actually being complex, the more open people become to perhaps shifting off of one of their viewpoints, which may be a polarity. Now, one of the things about as we get into these chapters that for me has been like a little irritant for me is that a lot of what Adam Grant is talking about can feel very manipulative. Let me take these wonderful tools about deep listening and let me use them all so that I can get you to believe what I want you to believe. And that's part of that is he's coming from a corporate perspective. He's trying to make this useful in a corporate climate where you're trying to get everyone on board to something. We are looking at it through a spiritual prism, and I really want to make people aware that deep listening is not manipulation. That what we are being called to do is to not take these ideas that we're being presented with, where I'm actually going to ask you, tell me more, just so that I can use it to get you to let go of what you believe and come over to my side. We've missed the point completely if we're still caught in the idea that there is a side. So what if there is something beyond the right and the wrong? What if there's something even larger that we need both perspectives to be able to access, to be able to understand? That is actually the complexity that we are all being invited into. Yes. So he has this cartoon in the book, right? So the answers, simple but wrong, complex but right. And you notice how even in this, we're back in a binary, right? It's either wrong or it's right. So what I want to invite us into is this idea that the places where we want to go for the simple solutions, that we are being invited to look for the shades of gray. Where is it that there is something that I am not seeing? And if we truly come at it from our own perspective of trying to grow and to understand more, the result will be a place of connection, right? Daryl Davis sort of does this beautifully, right, in his conversations. He didn't set out to make that member of the Klan not be a member of the Klan. He didn't have an agenda in that way. He was coming at it from a place of, let me listen. I want to listen. I need to understand this because I really don't understand this. And in that place, something new was able to emerge. So we're coming back again. We talked about this like week 1. Whew, that was a long time ago. But it comes back again in these chapters, that we believe, what we believe depends on what we want to believe. Really think about that. What we believe depends on what we want to believe. So we are the architect of our own belief system. We are deciding what we want to believe. Can we make that bigger? Can we consciously understand that we are always looking for the things that are going to support the belief we already have? And can we be willing to step into the uncomfortable space? And this is those charged conversations. These are those conversations that most of us want to avoid. These are those conversations that are difficult, where somebody we care about may not believe or agree with the things that we believe and want them to agree with. And how do we actually have a conversation around that? Because in the binary bias, which is the other thing that comes up, is that we just keep assuming that there's an us and a them. That there are believers and there are non-believers. And this binary bias is just permeating our political scene right now. That is all that is happening, and the desirability bias. everybody wants to hear what they want to believe, and everybody wants to think that the people who don't agree with us are somehow, and remember the hot dog, is the hot dog a bun? Right? And we not only, we're willing to sacrifice our own good in order to make the people who disagree with us suffer, even when it's over something as silly as whether a hot dog is a sandwich or not. Right? We'll take less money so they get less money, rather than us getting more money and them getting more money. Because we want the other side to suffer for whatever it is that they believe. So how can you have how can you have an open, safe conversation when at the root of that conversation is, I want the worst for you. I am going to choose the worst for you. Even if I suffer from it, I don't care. That's the mentality that we are being invited to shift out of. We saw it with all of the partisanship that was happening around aid to Florida, right? That's what we were seeing. It doesn't matter if it hurts me, it's got to hurt you more. So he also talks about the difference between a skeptic and a denier. So they're not the same thing. A skeptic questions and updates their perspective based on what they discover. So that is a tell me more. Right? And as you tell me more, I continue growing and evolving in my understanding. I don't necessarily believe it 100%. I'm a skeptic, but I am open to listening as to why I should believe this. A denier dismisses and ignores what does not align with their perspective. And that's where we hear language like, well, that's not my experience. And what we're saying is, because it's not my experience, it's not real. Because I haven't actually experienced that, it doesn't really exist. And we see this all the time in conversations around race. We see this all the time in conversations around gay rights, trans rights. If it doesn't actually directly impact me and it's not my experience, then it has no validity. And that is what ends up with us being in this polarized world. So, the Difficult Conversation Lab, there's actually a place you can go where you can study difficult conversations, and you're going to read about it in these chapters. And it's a lab where you can volunteer to sign up for it. It's completely like regular humans that show up and say, okay, I want to be a participant in this. And the way it works is you are given a very charged topic of discussion, and you are paired with somebody who has the absolute opposite views that you do. And you have 20 minutes to come together and to write an agreement about this topic that you both agree to and sign. 20 minutes. And what he does is the pairs are given either one of two different types of material before they meet. They're either given material which discusses a completely different polarizing issue. So it's not the issue you're going to talk about with your partner, a completely different polarizing issue. So if perhaps your issue with your partner is abortion, you might get something about climate change. And you're given there's two options as to what you read about climate change. You're either reading something that is very complex and has lots of gray area in it, or you are reading something that is completely one side or the other, black and white, pick it. And then you go in and have this conversation, this difficult conversation with this person on the other side of the spectrum from you. And what they have discovered again and again and again and again is that the people who were given the material that was complex before they went in actually are able to come to an agreement. They're actually able to bring the understanding that complexity is part of this equation, and they're able to bring it into the next thing that they're talking about. Now, not everybody's able to come to an agreement, but more people are able to come to an agreement when they have had exposure to the complexity of the issue, of how complex issues can be. Whereas those who were given the polarizing material to read beforehand, they do not ever come to agreement. ever. So this idea of standing on our soapbox and preaching our point of view and expecting the world to change does not work. And yet we do it again and again and again. Why won't they just listen? When what we really should be asking is, how am I being invited to listen? Yes, amen. Right? So what this graph shows is that once they do their 20 minutes and they either sign their document or they don't, he has recorded their conversation and what's happening in the room with them during those 20 minutes. And then he plays it back for them, and they're hooked up to all kinds of electrodes while it's played back to them. And the one on the left is the people who were very polarized. And what you can see is that their emotions are just as polarized. They're just either up or down, or up or down, or up or down. And what you see on the right is the emotional experiences of those who are working with the idea of complexity. That they don't just feel one thing or another. They feel a whole range of emotions when they are in the midst of these complex discussions. So some things they agree with, some things make them sad, some things make them happy, some things make them angry, but there's a whole range of emotions that they're actually experiencing. So what this tells Adam Grant is that what stands in the way of rethinking isn't the expression of emotion, it's the restricted range of emotion. That if we're only fixated on the yes or the no, the right or the wrong, I got it or I'm stymied, then that doesn't move the dial in any way, shape, or form. Charged conversations are crying out for nuance. And we as a spiritual community are specifically poised to be able to answer that cry. Because we have at our fingertips some of the most powerful practices to allow us to show up in the nuance. We have prayer, we have meditation, we have visioning, we have community, we have journaling, we have internal processes, we have forgiveness. We have all of these practices that we step into on a regular basis that allow us to cultivate our capacity to be centered and still, to be open-hearted, to be compassionate. Most importantly, spiritual practice helps us become self-aware. It allows us to become aware of, oh, watch me being reactive. Whoa, look at what just got unearthed inside of me. And then what do we say? I have to go sit with that. I'm going to go sit with that. I got to go unpack that. And what we're really saying is that we're willing to release the guilt and the shame, especially when we know the truth of our divine identity. How much easier is it to release guilt and shame when we actually stand in the space, in the place where we know that we are divine? That we're willing to grow into our divine self. The whole point of unity is the revelation of our Christ Buddha-ness. That is the whole point of unity. That we are here to reveal the Christ Buddha Atman isness that we are. The I am, that is the I am. And when we're doing that, we're letting go of the humanness. We're letting go of the story. And you've experienced that. I know every single person in here who has a practice has experienced feeling overwhelmed by the world and then stepping into prayer or meditation and discovering, as Kim spoke so beautifully in our inspirational reading, the mountaintop. Being able to see more than whatever it is that is creating that emotional storm within us. And then the biggest gift, I believe, is community and connection. That we get to get reflected back to us over and over and over again, even when I feel as if I made a mistake, or I didn't say the right thing, or I did the wrong thing, or what gets reflected back to me is, we love you. We love you. We love you in your humanness because we can see your divinity. We love you in your humanness because we can see that you are willing to grow. We love you in your humanness because we're also human. And so that kind of judgment isn't helpful. So when we're able to stand in all of this, can you feel how prepared we are for nuanced conversations? That when you're about to go into a charged conversation with someone, what do? I know what I do. I pray. I get still. I activate within me that the wisdom that I am, the compassion that I am, is where I'll be speaking from and where I'll be living from. That is how I'm going to move through whatever challenge might be arising in time and in space. So one of the pieces in these chapters is an upsetting piece in the narrative of race relations in America. So he talks about the woman in Central Park who had her dog off the leash, and the black man asked her to put her dog on the leash, and her response to that was to pick up her cell phone and say that her life was being threatened by this man in Central Park. And when she finally made her apology, this is what she said: "I am not a racist. I did not mean to harm that man in any way. I think I was just scared." Now, we can all relate to this statement, right? That I'm not a racist, I really didn't mean that, and I just got scared, or I just whatever got activated for us in our own reactivity. But the problem with that is that she's not actually taking responsibility for the fact of what she actually did and why she thought that she could lie to the police and that she would be believed. She wasn't owning her contribution. Now, granted, her intention wasn't to do that, but still, as he says, her simple denial overlooks the complex reality that racism is a function of our actions, not merely our intentions. Now, substitute in there any other ism, ageism, right? Substitute them in there. It's a function of our actions, not merely our intentions. So while we absolutely hold good intentions from the people who we are interacting with, it's one of the things we say yes to, at the same time, we personally cannot use that as an out for the impact of the actions that we have actually engaged in. So impact matters. It matters. We can't ignore impact. We grow by listening deeply to how our actions impact others. That is how we grow. Because if we're saying there is no impact there, what's wrong with them? There's no impact there. They're too sensitive, right? No, I didn't really mean it that way, and they should know that I didn't mean it that way. What we're doing is we're dismissing their lived experience. What we're doing is dismissing the fact that there's another perspective out there, a life that we did not live. And for a lot of us, we can be grateful that we didn't have to live that life. So are we willing to step out of our comfort zone, our safe world? Because that's why we avoid complexity, right? That's why we take the simple choice. Because the simple choice is going to keep us safe. It's going to keep us in our bubble. It's going to keep us with what we believe to be true intact. And when we actually get into the complexity of life itself, it's messy. It's messy. And that is precisely what a spiritual community is prepared for. We actually have skills that a lot of people don't have in the world. We actually have something to bring to those charged conversations, that because we have been practicing them, they are alive within us in a way that allows us to really be ambassadors to this idea of deep listening, this idea of being willing to step outside what is familiar for each of us, And it begins by just being willing to listen. I come back to these 4 things. I see you. I respect you. Tell me more. I can think again. We're not asking them to think again. That's not our business. We are inviting ourselves to think again. Amen. So let's do these as affirmations, right? I am willing to see the wholeness that everyone is. I will respect differing opinions. I am willing to say, tell me more. I am willing to think again. And so it is. Amen.